Nobody tells you this when you are young, but one day you will feel something so expensive, it can quietly ruin your entire life. And the terrifying part is, it is not a car. Not a mansion. Not a luxury watch. The most expensive feeling in the world is the feeling of needing to prove that you matter. Right now across America, millions of people are destroying themselves financially for one invisible reason. Not survival. Not emergencies. Not hunger. Validation. People buying things they do not even enjoy, just to feel respected for 5 seconds. And once you notice how deep this system really goes, you cannot unsee it. Because modern life turned attention into currency. Social media made status visible every second. Now people no longer compare themselves to neighbors. They compare themselves to celebrities, influencers, athletes, startup founders, crypto millionaires, and strangers pretending to be rich online. And slowly, without realizing it, people begin spending emotionally just to avoid feeling behind. That is where the trap begins. A 27-year-old man named Mason learned this the hard way. 3 years ago, he lived in a tiny apartment in Phoenix working a normal insurance sales job. Nothing glamorous. Basic paycheck. Basic life. But every morning before work, he opened Instagram and watched people his age posting luxury apartments, expensive dinners, vacations in Greece, designer clothes, perfect girlfriends, rooftop parties, and brand new cars with giant red bows on them. At first, it only made him slightly insecure. Then it became psychological torture. Because eventually he stopped asking, "Do I even want these things?" and started asking, "What is wrong with me for not having them?" That single mindset shift quietly changed his entire financial life. Within 1 year, Mason financed a luxury car he could barely afford, upgraded apartments, bought expensive clothes, started going to high-end restaurants, and began posting carefully edited photos online pretending life was amazing. And the scary part? It worked. People treated him differently immediately. More attention. More compliments. More respect. Even strangers reacted differently to him. For the first time in his life, he felt important. But behind the scenes, he was falling apart financially. Every month became survival math. Rent. Car payment. Insurance. Credit cards. Minimum balances. He stopped sleeping peacefully. One unexpected expense could destroy everything. But he could not stop now because the lifestyle itself had become addictive. That is what nobody explains about status. Once people become emotionally attached to appearing successful, they will sacrifice almost anything to maintain the illusion. And companies understand this perfectly. That is why modern society is designed around emotional spending. Luxury brands do not sell products. They sell identity. Expensive restaurants do not sell food. They sell status experiences. Social media does not sell entertainment. It sells comparison. The system quietly teaches people that being admired matters more than being financially free. And honestly, most people never escape that trap. Because humans are deeply emotional creatures pretending to make logical decisions. One Mason attended a birthday dinner at an expensive rooftop restaurant in Los Angeles. Everyone looked successful. Watches glowing under dim lights. Designer outfits. Perfect photos for social media. Expensive cocktails arriving every few minutes. From the outside, the table looked rich. But later that night, something strange happened. Mason accidentally overheard 2 men in the bathroom whispering about splitting payments because one of their credit cards had been declined. Another guy quietly asked a friend for gas money downstairs near valet parking. And suddenly Mason realized something terrifying. Half the people living luxury lifestyles were secretly panicking financially behind the scenes. That was the moment he began noticing the hidden truth about modern wealth. Most people are not chasing happiness anymore. They are chasing perception. And perception is unbelievably expensive to maintain. That realization became even darker after Mason met an older man named Victor during a delayed airport flight. Victor looked completely ordinary. Cheap shoes. Old backpack. No luxury signals at all. But during conversation, Mason discovered Victor quietly owned multiple warehouse buildings, index fund portfolios, and several boring businesses producing income every month. The man was worth millions. Yet nobody at the airport looked at him twice. And when Mason asked why he lived so simply, Victor smiled and said something he never forgot. The people trying hardest to look rich are usually the people who can least afford it. That sentence haunted Mason for months. Because suddenly the world started looking different. The loudest people online often seemed the most desperate for attention. The flashiest lifestyles often carried the heaviest debt. And meanwhile, truly wealthy people frequently looked completely normal. Quiet houses. Normal clothes. Used cars. Calm lives. No performance. No desperation to impress strangers. Just freedom. That is when Mason discovered the real game wealthy people play. Poor people buy things. Middle-class people buy lifestyles. Wealthy people buy ownership. Ownership of businesses. Ownership of assets. Ownership of investments. Ownership of time. Because eventually smart people realize something modern culture hides extremely well. Looking rich and being financially free are completely different lives. One creates pressure. The other removes it. One depends on constant income. The other creates stability. One is performance. The other is peace. But peace is difficult to sell online. Nobody goes viral for living below their means. Nobody becomes an influencer by quietly investing into index funds for 15 years. The internet rewards visible consumption emotionally, while real wealth usually grows invisibly for years. That is why so many people stay trapped. Mason slowly started changing his life. Not dramatically. Quietly. He sold the luxury car and bought a reliable used sedan. Moved into a smaller apartment. Deleted shopping apps from his phone. Stopped trying to impress people online. At first it felt humiliating. Like he was losing status. But something unexpected happened almost immediately. His anxiety started disappearing. For the first time in years, he could breathe financially. He started investing automatically every month before spending money on entertainment. Started building savings. Started thinking long-term instead of emotionally. And the craziest part? Almost nobody noticed. Because most people are too busy trying to protect their own image to deeply analyze yours. That realization alone changed him psychologically forever. Then one afternoon, Mason opened social media and saw an influencer showing off a rented Lamborghini beside a mansion that was not even his. Normally that content would have made him insecure instantly. But this time he saw something different. Exhaustion. Performance. Constant pressure to maintain an illusion. And suddenly he understood the hidden emotional cost of modern status culture. Many people are not living anymore. They are performing endlessly for invisible audiences online, hoping strangers will validate their existence. But validation fades quickly. That is why the feeling becomes so expensive. The more externally validation dependent somebody becomes, the more money they usually need just to maintain emotional stability. Bigger purchases. Bigger lifestyles. Bigger signals. Bigger reactions. It never ends. That is why some people making $200,000 still feel broke emotionally. Because their identity depends on maintaining an image. Meanwhile, somebody earning far less but living below their means often sleeps peacefully every night. One person purchased perception. The other purchased freedom. And freedom behaves differently than status. Freedom is quiet. Freedom is surviving emergencies calmly. Freedom is leaving toxic jobs. Freedom is not panicking every time the economy slows down. Freedom is not needing strangers online to feel valuable. That is the difference wealthy people eventually understand. The goal is not to look untouchable. The goal is to become untouchable financially and emotionally. Right now, somewhere in America, somebody is buying something expensive they do not even truly want, because deep down they hope another human being will finally see them differently afterward. And honestly, that feeling has probably destroyed more money than bad investments ever will. Because the most expensive feeling in the world is not greed. It is insecurity mixed with comparison. And modern culture monetizes that feeling perfectly. But the moment somebody stops needing external validation to feel successful, the entire system starts losing power over them. Suddenly luxury becomes optional instead of emotional survival. Suddenly comparison becomes less addictive. Suddenly money becomes a tool instead of a performance. And that shift changes everything. Because at the end of the day, the people who look richest are not always the wealthiest. Sometimes the truly wealthy person is the quiet one nobody notices. The person sleeping peacefully. The person without financial panic. The person not performing online. The person who owns their time. And in a world obsessed with appearances, that kind of freedom has become extremely rare.